In the year 2300, the story of that decision has already been written across planets, rings, and the empty volume between them. This documentary takes you on a journey not only across light years, but into the minds and choices of people who decided that humanity's fate will be chosen by those who dared to leave. We will reveal how we left Earth, what we sacrificed, and what we discovered along the way. The beginning was not sudden. It was a long burn, a series of small, almost invisible steps: better fusion reactors, robust radiation shielding, adaptive climate domes, and the slow perfection of life support. It was decades of incremental engineering and stubborn imagination. But the real acceleration came when three forces converged: planetary decline, private ambition, and the maturity of artificial intelligence. Planetary decline was not a sudden catastrophe. It was a century of consequences: shifting weather patterns, algal tides in seas once blue, coastal cities rearranged, and fragile economies strained by resource scarcity. People felt it as a steady pressure, not a bang. Many asked, why leave? Why not fix what we have? That was a fair question. But others answered that to secure the species, you must diversify the habitats in which it can survive. Survival, they insisted, is a portfolio problem. Do not be anchored to one failing asset. Private ambition followed. Powerful organizations emerged: design houses, propulsion cartels, and habitat builders. The Helios Consortium, the Solark Trust, and a dozen lesser companies promised tickets to a new home. They marketed not just escape, but opportunity: land to own, gravity tailored to your children, a chance to untether social constraints you might have on Earth. Governments hesitated, argued, regulated, and occasionally collaborated. Insurance underwriters learned to price the unimaginable. And then there was AI, not the monstrous overlord some feared, but a web of caretaking intelligences that managed life support, optimized ecosystems, and ran the slow, grinding math of radiation shielding and orbital insertion. When minds and machines learned to build self-sustaining domes that could handle centuries without human intervention, it became possible to imagine long voyages where the ship was more than hardware, it was a living, learning home. In the year 2209, the first full ecosystem vessel was launched, the Argo II. It was neither the largest nor the most luxurious, but it proved a model. The Argo II used a hybrid drive field compression engines that traded thrust for steady, long-duration acceleration and carried 1,000 souls in rotating habitats that simulated gravity. Its mission: to reach a promising exoplanet in the Tau Ceti system within 70 years. That board of 50 people, scientists, artisans, engineers, and children, debated endlessly about governance, education, and who could board. They argued about the ethics of leaving Earth's wounded behind, about how to pass memory forward, and about the very meaning of a life lived in motion. Generational travel reshaped human identity. Children born under canopy stars would never set foot on the blue marble their ancestors called home. They would inherit languages mutated by isolation, rituals crafted aboard the ship, and political systems adapted to corridors and airlock decks. Some passengers chose the voyage precisely because they wanted a contained society, an intentional community beyond the noisy mess of Earth's democracies. Others boarded because they had nowhere else to go, refugees whose coastal towns had been repeatedly flooded or whose fields had failed year after year. But there were skeptics. This is an end of history, a slow drift toward gated legacies, they said. You will create a class of space-born elites, and you will desert the many to die in coastal cities. And yet, the Argo II and its successors changed the argument. Outposts became nodes, and nodes linked in trade and knowledge. Martian farms supplied protein to orbital constructors. Freed mineral streams from asteroids fed cities back on Earth. Space was expensive, yes, but it also knitted new interdependencies that made the old binaries leave or stay blur into networks of exchange. The first woman to step onto new soil in the Tau Ceti colony was not a billionaire or a celebrity. She was Dr. Laila Ibrahim, a soil microbiologist who had spent 20 years coaxing nitrogen cycles inside sealed biomes. She stepped down from the descent module with a small satchel of earth seeds and a promise in her eyes. Cameras transmitted the moment back across decades of network relays and multiple relay stations. For those watching, whether on an orbital ring lounge or in a flooded coastal square, the image became a symbol of hope and a provocation. Who gets to plant the first tree of a new world? But for every triumphant bootprint, there were losses. Infrastructure that couldn't be maintained collapsed. Early domes leaked and had to be abandoned. Ships launched with the best simulations failed to anticipate complex emergent behaviors in closed ecosystems. Politics on generational carriers grew strange. A child with no memory of Earth refused to accept a council vote to divert resources to a distant planet's relief effort. Why help strangers light years away? They asked. If our oxygen levels are already perilously low, such questions force settlements to negotiate the bounds of empathy across time and space. These moral dilemmas forced a reshaping of ethics. We invented new legal codes, the Stellar Compacts, the Intergenerational Accords, and a set of bioethical norms that addressed reproduction, resource allocation, and the rights of those born mid-voyage. Philosophers, once dismissed as ivory tower idealists, became essential designers in habitat governance. They argued that survival without meaning would be sterile, that a polity without memory would lose its humanity. By 2250, the solar system itself had been transformed. Orbital rings harvested sunlight and redirected it to industrial swarms. The asteroid belt hosted mining commons communities living in hollowed planetoids, trading raw ores for software and design. Mars was terraformed in patches. Some valleys held lakes under domes, others remained as research preserves. Humanity's footprint extended from Mercury's sunward platforms to Titan's methane piers. Each environment demanded different crafts: sail engineers at inner system stations, frost architects on cryogenic moons, and biotechnicians who negotiated with local microflora. And as humanity spread, new cultural forms emerged. Music adapted to long, low-G intervals. Cuisine transformed as we learned to taste proteins synthesized from algae and asteroid-baked tubers. Romance changed. Two relationships no longer assumed shared geography. We are citizens of orbits. People wrote in manifestos and diaries. We are no longer defined by the city block but by a shared archive and a shared set of life systems. Yet for all the wonder, the material realities remained brutal. Radiation storms could wipe a city's records. A single microfracture in a habitat ring could cascade into pressure failures. Economies were fragile and relentlessly competitive. The Helios Consortium's early attempt to build an interstellar transfer hub ended in scandal when a governance board diverted emergency oxygen supplies to secure proprietary patents for a private life support algorithm. Public outrage forced a rewrite of governance rules and a partial renationalization of essential systems. In the shadows of grand projects, black markets thrived. People trafficked engineered embryos with desired genetic markers. Designer settlers were sold to the highest bidder, promising children immune to certain pathogens or adapted to low gravity. The ethics of eugenics re-emerged in a new skin: not overt sterilization, but selective scarcity. Activists on Earth and in orbital commons fought to outlaw these practices, but enforcement across light years proved difficult, and laws lagged behind technology. We must talk about memory. Humans are creatures of narrative. We tell stories of where we came from, and those stories keep societies coherent. The long voyages forced new forms of remembering. Archive ships, floating libraries encoded in durable matter and quantum-stable memory became sanctuaries of Earth's literature, art, and code. Guardians were appointed, custodians sworn to keep the past alive, yet memory is not neutral. Early settlers edited history to make their origins heroic, excusing failures and amplifying triumphs. Who controls the archive controls the story that binds a people. Technology matured, and with it came the possibility of faster-than-light travel, but not in the science fiction sense most dreamed. It wasn't a warp drive that flung travelers instantaneously, but a loophole in propulsion physics. Non-local phase conduits that allowed for near-light but effectively practical travel between certain stellar corridors. These conduits were rare, unstable, and expensive. They changed the calculus for migration. Only the wealthiest polities secured conduit nodes, giving them immense leverage in trade and mobility. The politics around conduits became a central drama of the age: who could claim a path, who could pay the toll, and who could veto access. The year 2300 marks a cultural pivot. Human settlements carpeted several dozen star systems, connected by fragile transport lanes and by swifter conduits. Some colonies flourished and became culturally independent nations. Others languished and fossilized into microstates clinging to dwindling resources. Communication latency across interstellar distances remained a social problem. Lovers separated by light years learned to build lives on time-delayed intimacy. Councils waited months for replies that could not be hurried. But what of identity? The children of the Belt might call themselves Belt folk, while a Tau Ceti-born generation claimed Setians as their demonym. Earth-born citizens adopted hyphenated names: Terran Atlantean, Indo-Mercurial, Afro-orbital. Nationalism did not disappear. Instead, it remixed. People wrote new epics about the first descent on foreign soil, and holidays proliferated. The memory of the blue planet became religion to some, nostalgia to others, and, to still others, a cautionary tale stitched into the curriculum. Not all expansion was human exhaustive industry. Life beyond Earth changed our relationship to non-human systems. We learned to collaborate with synthetic ecologies, machines that matured plants and repaired soil. We found microbes on certain exoplanets that rewrote our understanding of life's possibilities. Simple amino acid chains that organized into stable systems challenged the old assumption that life required Earth-like conditions. Some colonies embraced biotic pluralism, intentionally inviting local life to join engineered biomes rather than supplanting it. Because of these encounters, an ethical debate emerged. Do humans have the right to terraform a world, to wipe out a delicate, nascent ecosystem for the sake of human habitability? Terraforming projects that earlier centuries had enthusiastically embraced now encountered fierce resistance from exoconservationists, advocates who argued that preserving alien ecologies was a moral duty. These debates grew heated in parliament halls, on orbital platforms, and in the noisy fora of social mesh networks. The outcome: restructured mission plans, adding precautionary layers, non-invasive research zones, shared oversight protocols, and a preference for coexistence where possible. There were moments of outright conflict. Water wars in the inner systems rocked a few settlements when a young enclave on a Ceres-like body diverted a glacier stream to support agricultural domes. A coalition from 3 neighboring mining commons launched a blockade and insisted on arbitration. The resulting conflict lasted 2 years, resolved only by a combination of mediation, a binding resource-sharing treaty, and the emergent authority of the Interplanetary Arbitration Council. That council, slow, imperfect, and sometimes mocked, became an important forum for dispute resolution. We must speak of art and faith. As humanity moved outward, art shifted in unpredictable ways. Sculptures used microgravity to shape forms impossible on planets. Music explored rhythms longer than human knees could bear on Earth, apartments designed for years-long slow dances. Religions adapted, and new spiritualities flowered. Some worshipped the machine mind that shepherded their habitat. Others celebrated the first light, the moment new suns rose over alien horizons. Faith leaders traveled between stations, mediating grief and naming new cosmologies. There were symbolic acts that marked our new era. In the year 2278, the Treaty of Holloway pledged that no single polity would own a whole biosphere. In 2284, the first interstellar medical corps was chartered, and in 2293, the Solar Memory Vault was sealed, an encrypted repository containing Earth's greatest works and the names of those who died in the early waves of migration. These acts signaled a species attempting to hold itself accountable while also daring to begin anew. But for all the institutions, the personal stories were what mattered most. We heard tales of a mother who carried a child through 3 settlements, refusing to give up citizenship status because she believed the child deserved the right to choose between worlds. We heard of engineers who fixed a failing reactor with nothing but duct tape and a prayer. We heard songs from a bar on a habitat spun so slow that patrons took hours to finish a glass of fermented algae wine, savoring every note of a long, slow composition. These small human scenes stitched meaning into systems. And yet, the cost was steep. The human body did not always adapt perfectly. Osteopenia and vision changes arrived in spaceborne populations. Some diseases once eradicated on Earth re-emerged in enclosed habitats due to unexpected microbe recombination. Mental health crises spiked in isolated stations where the absence of a horizon made days feel endless and undifferentiated. Psychotropic therapies and narrative medicine were developed to create meaning in long-term confinement. Therapists became critical civic workers who designed rituals, memory practices, and community interventions that reduced loneliness and kept cooperation possible. By 2300, a new generation of laws existed to protect travelers and residents. The Stellar Compacts guaranteed a minimum of life support standards. The Intergenerational Accords forbade forced marriages for citizenship and outlawed the sale of newborn rights. The treaties were imperfect, constantly rewritten, contested in courts run by both humans and impartial AI jurors. Enforcement remained the challenge. How do you police a private habitat 3 light-years away? The answer was partly technological. Satellites that monitored compliance, immutable public ledgers that recorded ownership and obligations, and a culture that prized transparency as a civic virtue. In this half-millennium of outward motion, we also learned to practice humility. The hubris that defined some pioneers, the belief that human engineering could control everything, met the stubborn reality of complexity. A biologist named Dr. Mateo Ruiz once said at a symposium, "We thought of planets like canvases. We were painters who forgot to listen to the ground." That humility gave rise to better science, adaptive engineering that took cues from local ecosystems instead of overriding them. As the calendar turned to 2300, technological mastery had not erased human vulnerability. Instead, it reframed it. We now understood that expansion carried a moral imperative: to avoid repeating exploitative patterns of colonial history. Decolonizing space became a guiding phrase. It meant educating settlers about consent, reparations, and the consequences of extraction. It meant including voices previously marginalized in planning missions and in distributing resources. It forced an ethical accounting. When you take from the dead planet, what do you owe the living who remain? The stars did not deliver utopia. They delivered a plural, messy future, some bright, some terrible. The year 2300 is not a narrative end but a checkpoint. We have ships that cross dark distances, colonies that sing strange songs, laws that try to protect multiple generations, and archives that insist we remember. Yet the greatest question remains: what do we carry forward? We could carry forward the worst of Earth greed, exclusion, and short-sighted profit and amplify it on a galactic scale. Or we could remember our errors and craft institutions that bind us to a different set of values: stewardship, equity, humility. History will judge us by which path we choose. The voice of those who arrived earliest is already echoing. Build, yes, but build with care. Take, yes, but compensate. Remember, yes, but do not romanticize. So, are you coming with me? Will you choose to be a witness to this moment? To vote, to organize, to invest in archives, in health systems, and in the public goods that make long voyages possible for more than just the wealthy? Or will you watch as new elites consolidate transit rights and call it destiny? We should pause and examine the concrete inventions that made year 2300 possible, not miracles, but steady accumulations of craft. Star habitats are modular machines, concentric rings linked by transfer tubes, each system purposely duplicated so a failure becomes a manageably local event. Life support moved beyond single-solution recycling to layered ecology. Photobioreactors for oxygen, fungal matrices for soil stabilization, and adaptive membranes that repaired microtears without human hands. Propulsion branched into pragmatism. Chemical boosters persisted for short hops, fusion tethers handled deep solar transfers, and plasma sails, pushed by coordinated laser farms, gave fuel-less corridors across interplanetary lanes. Interstellar migration relied on two approaches: slow, generational craft, with robust ecosystems and occasional conduit hops, rare, costly physics shortcuts that only consortiums could secure. A ship was thus as much governance structure as engineering project, because it had to solve social problems as reliably as it solved thermal loads. Education shifted to match these realities. Frontier curricula emphasized practical knowledge and ethical reasoning. Navigation, closed-system agriculture, emergency reactor repair, plus courses in comparative habitat ethics. Apprenticeships replaced long university residencies in many colonies because hands-on problem-solving mattered when a life support manifold cracked at 0300 ship time. Cultural literacy remained vital. Children learned the names of rivers their ancestors left behind, recited poets from multiple homelands, and practiced rituals that reminded them of the physical world that birthed their species. Legal norms evolved through hard-fought cases. The People vs. Helios established that private builders of shared infrastructure could not fully contract away public obligations, a ruling that imposed safety of Commonwealth standards on habitat constructors. Another precedent, Archive Custodian versus Commonwealth, affirmed that cultural archives of shared origin could not be monetized as proprietary assets. These rulings shaped a framework in which private initiative and public duty were legally entwined. The human cost of migration was stark. Some communities thrived, others withered. The houseless children who drifted between corridors and stations sometimes grew into resilient cosmopolitan citizens, and sometimes into people who never felt anchored to any place. Medical systems improved. Regenerative nanotherapies restored bone density and treated radiation injuries. Neural therapies mitigated prolonged isolation. But not all damage was physical. Isolation, loss, and cultural amnesia left scars that required social design to heal. Scientific surprises recalibrated our plans. In 2289, a moon called Lyra yielded microbes that metabolized sulfur and harnessed infrared light, a life form that taught biologists how ecosystems could function with unfamiliar energy flows. Suddenly, worlds dismissed as barren became candidates for hybrid habitats that cooperated with local biologies rather than supplanting them. That shift birthed exoconservation movements that argued for restraint and respect when settling new or fragile systems. Economics and inequality followed familiar patterns. Access to transit remained stratified. Early passage and conduit rights. Consolidated power. Markets developed around prepaid citizenship contracts where future children's rights were pledged to finance passage. Critics called this neo-indentured migration. Over time, international and interspace regulations curbed the worst abuses, and reparative programs, habitat scholarships, and infrastructure funds sought to rebalance opportunity. Political experimentation proliferated. Small habitats tried rotating councils and consensus assemblies. Others blended human deliberation with algorithmic adjudication. Transparent codes handled routine allocation while humans decided values-laden matters. These hybrid models required civic tech literacy and trust, sparking debates about transparency, algorithmic bias, and the place of human judgment in life or death choices. Art and ritual adapted imaginatively. Microgravity sculptors used suspended particles to craft ephemeral forms. Composers wrote suites that unfolded over months to match long, patient social rhythms. Memory keepers created remembrance curricula programs where elders taught children songs and place names with tactile artifacts, preventing cultural erasure. The Solar Memory Vault, sealed in 2293, encoded Earth's literature, music, and ancestry, lists in forms resistant to decay, serving as a civic anchor. Conflict was real, but often resolvable. Resource disputes flared when a mining commune diverted a glacier stream to feed domed farms, prompting a 2-year blockade and arbitration that led to binding resource-sharing treaties. The Interplanetary Arbitration Council emerged as a slow but stabilizing institution, mediating disputes where nations lacked reach. Where arbitration failed, protests and blockades sometimes did what diplomacy could not. Ethical debates deepened as contact with alien biologies became plausible. Some argued for terraforming as an extension of human flourishing. Others championed exoconservation, insisting we must not erase incipient life forms for our convenience. These conversations reshaped mission planning, leading to protocols that prioritized non-destructive research and minimized ecological imprint. Everyday courage stitched the political and technical into human life. Maintenance crews braved micrometeorite fields to replace panels. Nurses soothed children born under timed dawn cycles. Translators bridged dialects grown apart over decades. Small acts of care, a repaired hatch, a shared meal, a story told at bedtime were the material glue that bound communities across artificial horizons. Looking at 2300, the choice before humanity comes into sharper focus. We can amplify systemic injustice or build institutions that temper advantage with stewardship. The most radical lesson of this age is simple: care travels. The responsibilities we choose to carry across voids, education, archives, health systems, legal norms will define what civilization means when the blue planet is no longer the only address on a passport. So, are you coming with us? Will you vote for policies that broaden access to transit, strengthen commons-based archives, and require transparent governance for habitats? Or will you stand by while wealth buys passage to the stars and leaves others behind? The journey to the stars is not about leaving home. It is about expanding who we are willing to be responsible for. If these ideas moved you, share this documentary. Discuss it. Organize. Keep the memory of Earth alive in your communities. And whatever path we choose, choose with care, because the future we build among the stars will be judged by how well we learn to take care of one another. May our future be generous, wise, and just.